recording. All right, on to chapter 4. And so now we get into a little bit more of how we set up experiments. And so, the main thing, you have a test group, you have a control group. Your test group is the group that receives the treatment. And then your control group is the people that did not receive the treatment. Any questions on test group and control group? All right. So random assignment. So with random assignment, this is to try and cut down on selection bias, which is where if you're putting all of the same type of people in your test group and all of another type of people in your control group, then that selection bias of how these type of people are the one getting their treatment could alter the effects. So it could not actually, like in the term of a medical study, if you have all the young people that are taking the drug and then a bunch of old people that are getting a placebo and the young people all heal better, you could write a report saying, oh yeah, our drug improved, healing time by 80% based on this clinical study, when it more had to do with, well, you had a bunch of 20-year-olds versus a bunch of 60-year-olds. And so that's why the random assignment helped fight the selection bias. And so, the definition of selection bias is when a non-random process assigns subjects to test and control groups. Any questions on random assignments? All righty. Pre-treatment measurements. So I know we went over these like pretty at length, basically going to get a measurement, kind of your baseline before whatever the test is going to be. And so it is good to kind of see how much the actual treatment affected. You get, this is where everyone was before, then this is where the control group was after, and this is where the treatment group was after. But it is also good because it can help assess the effects of your random assignment, because you can see if they're like, if already, the people in your control group before you even, like, as they're pre-treatment, if they are already all, let's just say you just happen to get all Republicans or very conservative people in your control group, and then your test group is just happens to be a bunch of people that were more liberal, it's going to be able to show you that. And so how to affect your numbers, or you probably realize, depending if that had to do with what you're studying, you probably need to switch up the groups more to make it more level. So there's a lot of benefits to it, but then also depending on what type of study it is, it could not be useful to have the pre-treatment, because you're basically kind of like cueing people. So if you're asking people, what do you think about this issue? And then you have them watch a news show and that issue shows up, they're like, oh, that's weird. I was just asked about this. Maybe I'm supposed to, pay more attention because this was just mentioned. So it can sometimes cue them in to, pay more attention and show wrong measurements at the end. Any questions about pre-treatment measurements? All right, next it goes into laboratory and field experiments. I mean, these things went over pretty like quite a bit in class and everything. So are there really any questions between the difference between these two types of experiments? All right. So just real quick going over it. You know, laboratory experiments, they're done in a lab or some type of controlled environment. Subjects are generally aware that they are subjects. And so, you know, while you're able to control everything, there can be a lot of skewed measurements just because people know they're being studied. Field experiments are more real world. You're usually not able to control everything, but you generally get more true answers because people are just acting how they would normally because they think they are just normally. And it's a lot easier to study people without them being studied. All right. If there's no questions on that, then we'll move on to internal and external validity. So internal validity, this basically just means that the conditions that you created as the researcher are properly studying and measuring the intended effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. Very simple way, and is why I put it in bold with parentheses. Internal validity, if you have it, it means you did the experiment right. You are studying what or measuring what you are supposed to be measuring. And so it is getting a proper measurement. Now the issue, and so internal validity versus external validity. Internal validity, that's like more towards your laboratory experiments where you're able to control everything. Now the external validity, this is where when you're not able to control everything, it still holds true. And so that's why they say like field experiments have more external validity than laboratory, because it's people doing things in the real world, acting how they normally would. Any questions on that? All right. Sampling. I mean, I know that in this, he said he wasn't super concerned about sampling, just kind of understand what it is. A sample, like, you know, normally it's going to be random sample. It's just a sample that's randomly drawn from the population. Here, researchers ensure that every member of a population has an equal chance of being chosen for the sample. It eliminates bias difference between populations in the sample. And then it talks again about there could be a selectional bias and ways to combat that. And then also can be a response bias, which this occurs when some cases in the samples are more likely than others to be measured. So that's like if you're going to let's say a predominantly affluent area that is known to be mostly conservative people, and you're asking questions, the chances are, because of where you took your sample, the majority of your answers are going to be skewed to being conservative. But like I said, I know the book went over a bunch of different snowball sampling and all these other crazy things, but he said that he's not super concerned about that, just kind of understanding what sampling is. Are there any questions on that? All right, this is the end of chapter 4. So, hey, we only have one left. Only been about 2 hours we've been sitting here. Any other questions about chapter 4? Otherwise, I will end the meeting and then we'll start a new meeting for chapter 5. All righty. Thank you.